All right, so my name is Matt Ring. We're here to talk about, I introduced the wrong one. We're here to talk about building a self-sustaining developer community within your walls. So my name is Matt Ring, as I just said. I am a recovering developer turned technical product owner turned agile coach.
And I'm John.
Yeah. All right, so what we're going to talk about is basically our experiences. This feels really hot, like hot mic. Okay. We really want to talk about kind of our experiences, kind of fostering a developer culture within Principal. This is not a prescriptive approach, and your results may vary. It was also a little pretentious to us to assume that we might be on the left. I really meant we were on the right there, and yours is going to be much, much improved. So why do we care about this? What problem are we trying to solve? So in most of your organizations, and ours, of course, we have a lot of knowledge silos. We have teams of people working across divisions, working across lines of business, and they're all working on solving similar problems and trying to kind of get through things. So the problem that we would have is that if we would have a team that's trying to come up with or trying to solve a particular technical or other kind of problem, they may or may not know that someone else is having that exact same problem or may have already come up with that solution. So we got all these little pockets of silos. How do we kind of break that stuff down? With John and I, we work in a developer support space, a kind of a corporate shared services environment. So this model changed a little bit to where John and I tended to be kind of in the center there. So all those teams would be like, I have a problem, and then we would be the centerpiece that they would kind of go into us and say, hey, do you know anyone else who's having this problem? And that was really helpful for them to kind of engage. But it also created us, we served as the bottleneck. So everyone was having to come to us to figure out what that was. So really this was just kind of to solve our own problem. But what does this have to do with DevOps? So this is that third way if you're familiar with the DevOps handbook. If you're not familiar with it, it's been mentioned in at least 2 or 3 other sessions this morning so far. This is not required reading for DevOps, but this is kind of like the Bible for DevOps. So if you haven't read it yet, I would probably recommend putting this at the top of your list. There's a lot of great stuff here. But in it talks about the 3 ways, the first way being, of course, flow. So how quickly can you go from idea to getting something in the hands of your users? How quickly can you go through that process of from idea to building to testing to delivering? The second one is feedback. What's the way of feedback of once you deliver it, how do you know it's working well? How do you know it's doing the expected outcomes that you would want? And how can you take that feedback back into your system to improve it further? And of course, the third way, which is more around creating a culture of learning, creating a culture of experimentation, and how do you continue to have this? So DevOps really is kind of that union of people, process, and the tools and technologies. And so for the purpose of this remaining session, we really wanted to focus on that people aspect, or what some people would refer to as the touchy-feely parts of DevOps.
So what have we done to kind of foster this growth and learning culture at Principal? We really try to do a lot of communication with our developers and with the people that we support. And that can be done a couple different ways. You can do communication via email, but there are lots of reasons why you don't want to do that. The responses are not really viewable by everyone unless you do a reply all, and reply all is awful, and you should not do reply all. So emails are also a snapshot in time. You can't really have that be a living record, and it's also not very discoverable. If I send an email to Matt, then Matt's the only one who can look at that, and he has to go through his email and search for it. When we started doing blog posts, now everyone can join the conversation. You've got comments at the bottom. You can have guest blog posts. Really, everyone is able to see that and able to comment on it, able to join that conversation. It can be a living record. You can update them. You can add to them. You can update information if it's outdated. And it's searchable, and you can link to it. So you can say, I think I read a blog post about that a couple months ago, and you can search for it, or you can say, I know that problem you're having. We wrote a blog post about it. Here's the link to it. So it's really about a lot more open communication and a lot more open, searchable area of your communication with people. When you write blogs, You want to keep it short because people don't really care what you have to say. They want to get stuff out of it. If you think about the blogs that you read, unless it's somebody super famous and you care about their everyday life and what they ate for lunch yesterday, you don't really care about the person behind it. You want to get your information and get out of there. So keep that in mind when you're writing blog posts, that you keep them short and simple and to the point, and really highlight what is in it for the person you're trying to reach. Another thing that's important with blogs is, or any communication, is authenticity. A lot of times people really just like to share their successes, and when you act like you know it all, then people start to disconnect and don't really care about what you say. So if you share your successes and your failures, then it promotes that authenticity and allows people to really trust what you have to say because they know you're going to tell it like it is. Brian Harry was the ALM manager at Microsoft, and he has written several blog posts about when an outage happens with one of his products. What went wrong? Why did it happen? And what are we doing to fix it? And I think those are really great ways to just show the community that you care and that you're trying to fix things and that you're really working to better the system. Internal developer conferences. We've got a couple of these at Principal, and these are a good way to get a lot of people together for one. Ours are usually a one-day event where everybody comes together. You can have internal speakers. You can bring in people from outside to talk. It gives people the opportunity to share what they've learned, and it can be a lot less intimidating speaking to your peers rather than a group of strangers in a room at an external conference. This is also a good place to just try out some new things. So one of the things we tried out that we learned from the Microsoft Build event was code labs. So we have a room where you bring your laptop and you actually try something. So you learn Git or you learn how to put something in Azure. And it's hands-on. There's somebody there to help you out with anything that goes wrong. But it's a nice way to try out new things. Another tactic that we like to use for these developer conferences is to provide food, because nobody doesn't like food, right? And that's a great way to get people there. You say free food and everybody comes running, and then they stay for the learning. So you got your ninja skills getting people learned while you're giving them free food. This is the developer conference is a high effort, high value proposition. So it's going to take some effort, it's going to take some budget, but there's a lot of value that can come out of that. A smaller version of this is lunch and learns. We have these about once a month where somebody gets up and talks about something they've experienced or some project they're working on or some tool or technique that they're working on. If you can provide food, again, that helps get people there. But the point is to share knowledge and to get that knowledge from within the community. Lightning talks are another smaller way. They're about 5 to 10 minutes, like the Ignite talks that we're going to see later today. It's a lot more of an informal show and tell or a demo. Maybe an article I read or a conference that I went to. Here's some of my thoughts. It's a lot less intimidating than trying to put together a 45-minute to an hour presentation. And really, all of these are ways to find the hidden skills within your community, within your company. There's a lot of people, like Matt was talking about, in different silos, and if you can pull those people out and get them in front of the whole community, then it shares that knowledge and it shows that there are other people within the company who know things and that you can go to talk about issues that you're having or how did you solve this problem. Just a show of hands, how many of you understand this reference? More than I thought, wow.
You're not that old.
This is, I guess not. That's from Napoleon Dynamite, if you didn't know. So it's what, early 2000s or something. So if you haven't seen it, I don't know whether to recommend watching it or not. It was hilarious at the time, but I don't know how well it's aged. Another great way of sharing information, sharing knowledge is internal open source coding. And this is a way for you to share projects that you're working on that somebody else in the company may be able to get use out of. This is really good for things that are more specific to your organization, whether it's the infrastructure that you have or any restrictions, security, network, that sort of thing, or any special requirements that your company has. It's a way to get people involved where they don't have to give a talk, they don't have to write a blog post, they can just contribute code to a shared repository, and it gets people sharing tools that they actually will use, and then they get to improve it. So we just released some open source, internal open source code at Principal about a week or two ago, and just this past week, somebody contributed to it. They said, I found a bug in here, I figured out the solution, so here's the code. And we said, all right, great. Create a pull request and we'll add it to the code. So it's a great way to get people to understand the tools that they're using and be able to share their knowledge and experience too. Q&A forums, or Q&A and forums are great ways to share knowledge if you don't know what you're looking for, or if you have a problem and you're pretty sure somebody else is able to solve that within the company. A lot of times Matt and I will get questions from people and either we won't know the answer but we'll know somebody who does know the answer, or we will know the answer but we want to share it with everybody. So we'll say, that sounds great, put it up on the Confluence questions and we'll answer it, or we'll mention somebody who might be able to help. And then it's out there, it's searchable just like blogs. It's linkable, so if somebody else has the same issue, you can go back there. It's got the person who answered it, it's got their name on it, so you can reach out to them if you have more questions. The internal community, that doesn't look quite right. That's better. Internal community wikis are another great way to share knowledge. We've got one, we use Confluence, but it really doesn't matter what tool you use as long as it's not SharePoint. If you share this information with the community and have it open, we opened it up so that anybody could contribute. And then we've got people who say, oh, I found a mistake here, or here's an addition, or this tool has been updated, so now you have to do this. Then anybody can contribute to it, and you all get the benefit from it. So some common themes, it really doesn't matter what tools you use, it doesn't matter what techniques you use, but the thing that we want you to get out of this is that you share knowledge. This is something that is within your own walls, within your company. There's a lot of knowledge. Regular communication helps with that, helps to show that there's that knowledge out there and to show that people are willing to share with others. And then getting others involved. We don't have all the answers, and we don't want to act like we do, and it wouldn't happen if we didn't have others within the company helping us with that.
All right, so again, this is not a prescriptive approach. These are some of the things that we've tried within the company, and there's various different things in terms of written communication, interactions, different things there. So what I wanted to end kind of here with was, if you saw some things that you have already been doing or some things that are new, either way, that you may have not gotten traction, potentially kind of where do you start, or how do you identify why it might not have worked the last time? So Andrew had this guy up here in his keynote, so this is a refresher, but just a reminder. So no matter what, how strong or how clear your vision is, or your strategy, or how detailed you have it, whatever your culture is that you're in is going to dictate how effective that is. So no strategy on its own is going to overcome a culture that is not open to this. So we look at John Shook's change model here. Anybody familiar with this? Anybody seen this before? A couple of hands, more people that don't really feel like opening their hands. Okay. So John Shook was basically, he's an American manager. He actually went over to Toyota, so this is why he's relevant. He actually went over to Japan to understand how Toyota was managing their manufacturing, their Toyota production system, which is largely credited for lean manufacturing, and how you could bring that back to basically American companies. And what he found was that this traditional way that management or that organizations have introduce these changes is they generally start with, all right, here's how you need to think. And here's what you need to value now. You valued these things or you thought this way. I need you to think this way instead. And then they go. And there's just kind of this natural assumption that people will change the way that they do their work to align with those things. And what they found was that, surprise, surprise, that never happens. People are creatures of habit, so they do that. So what he found was that the new way of doing that is let them understand what the value is, but start by changing the behaviors, change the practices. And by changing the way that people do their work, they will change the way that they're thinking about their work and ultimately change how they're valuing it. So related to our development structures, stop trying to tell people that you need to start sharing what you're doing or sharing your information, but just start introducing these mediums for them to enable them to do these types of things. Lunch and learns, developer days, et cetera, things like that. The other thing is look at across your organization. So if you're wanting to start with these ways where you're getting people to share some of their learning, look across your developer community or your community that you want to do this with, and identify where people kind of fall within this adoption curve. And really where you want to spend most of your time is on that far left there, where you've got your innovators and your early adopters. These are the people that are actively trying out new technologies, new tools. They're talking about it just in their day-to-day stuff, like, hey, I just played around with Docker, or I did something up in the clouds, whatnot. But they're actively doing this stuff. Get them to do a blog post or do a lightning talk or something like that. And then over time, what you'll do is you'll get those quick wins. And then the people that are like, yeah, this sounds like a good idea, but I don't know what I would talk about, or nobody really cares what I have to say. They'll find these early wins, and they'll be like, oh, this isn't so hard. Maybe I could do this as well. And you'll kind of make your way up the curve. Spend less time on the late majority. They're going to come along. And then the people that are the laggards, I would really just not spend really any time on them. They're going to come along or they're not. And maybe the people that are actively sabotaging this effort, you pay a little bit of attention to them so that you kind of keep them out of the way. But otherwise, don't try and convince them why this is a good idea, because it's going to be a lot of wasted effort. Another good thing to do is basically kind of measure your progress. So it's great that we can make a change, but how do we know if the change is actually taking effect? So there's a few different things that you can kind of quantify whether you're making an improvement to kind of towards this self-sharing or this sharing developer community. And I kind of broke these down into a couple different ways. There's vanity metrics, which vanity metrics are things that they're useful, but they can also be easy to game. Like, how many people hit my page? Well, I could just quick refresh all day long, and I bump that up. So blog page hits, people that are subscribed to your blog or your newsletter or your whatever, people that say they're going to show up to your lunch and learns. Those are nice to have metrics, but they don't necessarily tell the whole story. The other thing are these actionable metrics in terms of engagement. How many people actually are contributing? They're posting blog comments. They're engaging in the discussion. People like unique people that are coming to your site, as well as internal open source contributions. How many people are actually engaging in that type of stuff? Those are the things that you want to continue to foster. And again, it won't happen overnight. This is kind of a high-level view of our 6-year journey, I guess. We started out with a blog post on that wonderful platform called SharePoint. It was glorious. 2 years later, we decided that wasn't very good. And really, the reason it wasn't very good is that, besides it not being a great blogging platform, we were not getting a lot of engagement from our community. So we ended up shifting. And that was a little bit of a change, but the community came along. But in 2012, we did blog posts. 4 months later, we had our first guest blog post, so we were getting more people involved. 2013, started inviting some local user groups. Hey, come to our site. We'll host. It'd be great. We'll provide lunch, but you guys are the smart people. Come bring your ideas. We had our first developer conference. What else? We used Confluence. If you were here at the last session, Joel didn't have any anything really nice to say about Confluence or SharePoint, but that's kind of where we have a lot of our documentation. So we wanted to open it up more like an open wiki style. So we didn't want to have our just like a small subset of people who could contribute content. We wanted everyone to be able to do it. 2016, and 2016 was an interesting one where we organized a watch party for an external event. We didn't really have a lot of attendance in that. So this was just another example where we didn't do everything great the right way. We experimented. We realized that wasn't a great thing, so we tried something different. And then 2018 was our first internal open source, so we go from there. So again, even after 6 years, it still takes continuous care and feeding. We are here, I would say. We're even after 6 years, I think we're kind of getting just about over that hump, maybe. I like to think that if I'm past the hump, I will realize it, but we'll see. All right, so closing challenge to you. How will you share what you've learned at this conference back with your community that you're going back to, and not just your boss? Any questions? Man, we got done early. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great question. It does tend to be kind of a hobby. A lot of it is just kind of face-to-face interaction and going out and finding those people to start with. And then, I mean, sometimes it's, it's incentivizing them to, to contribute something or say, hey, can I work with you together on something? Can I ease some of the burden for what you're doing? Or can I take you out to lunch maybe or something like that? I don't know if you got anything else.
The other thing is just make sure that they put it on their year-end review. I know that's a silly little thing, but leaders and managers really like to see that you're contributing back, and so having stuff like that on your review really bumps you up a little bit. So.
Yeah, there could be it could also be from a culture standpoint. If from a management standpoint or leader standpoint, they're not incentivizing people to actively contribute back, then that might be something where if you're trying to start this up, going to that source and talking with leaders and saying, all right, do you feel like this is valuable? And if so, how can we incentivize the people or the employees to contribute? So, yeah, good. Other questions? Chuck.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So make that knowledge base your source of truth and have everyone going there. Yep.
Yeah. Do you guys know who Scott Hanselman is? He gave a talk and talked about conserving your keystrokes. So you only have a limited number of keystrokes before you die, and so you want to make those keystrokes count. And he said the way to do that is if somebody emails you, just like Chuck said, if somebody emails you a question and you think that anybody else might possibly get some use out of it someday, put it in a blog post, put it in a Confluence page, put it somewhere that's discoverable and linkable, that other people can see it. Because then, like Chuck said, it doesn't just die in your email. You don't have to reply the same thing over and over to people. You can just point them to the same place. And I mean, when I joined Matt's team a year and a half ago, I would ask him questions and he'd say, let's look at Confluence. And whether he knew those answers or not, I still don't know. He may have had them in his head or he may have just had no idea. But that trained me to go to Confluence, go to our wiki pages to search for the answers because there's a lot of knowledge out there. And so linking people back to Confluence or to whatever your wiki is will also help train them to go and look for that in the documentation. Anybody else?
Yep. So a little context there. So Principal is just starting to dip its toes into open source, and we're having discussions about, what's public open source, what's internal open source, and so it's the concept is still fairly new that we're kind of spreading out. The one that we started out with was really more just kind of a developer productivity kind of utility. So it's those types of like shared components or utility kind of apps, things like that. I think that as we start to get those wins and people start to get confidence and comfort in that, we'll probably start to open it up a little bit more into more of some of those business-facing things. The other part of it is just kind of getting that confidence of, well, if somebody's not familiar with the code base and they check in a change, how do I know that's not just going to immediately go to production because now I've done continuous deployment or continuous delivery or whatever? And I was like, well, there's controls that you put in place there, so that you're not just taking rampant things. So there's just kind of a build awareness and confidence building there. All right. Thank you all very much. We got you down a little bit early. You even have time to go for a bio break and then get lunch. See ya.
Thank you.